Hello and welcome back to my channel, Literary Lauren. Today we're going to discuss all of my January and February reads of 2025. Just between you and me, I think I am going to have the best reading year ever, and we're about to discuss the 21 books that I've read so far this year that have contributed to that best reading year. I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I read about 10 books in January and 11 in February. Let's get into everything that I read in January. In January, we continued my Ali Hazelwood addiction, and we started the year off with a bang with Ali Hazelwood's Love on the Brain. In this book, we are following Bea, and she is joining NASA to be the lead on a neuroscience project, I believe. We meet Levi. They start out as rivals and they morph into lovers in the most beautiful, beautiful way. They have this attraction for each other going from the jump. Little do they know, they both have alter egos as Agony Aunt Twitter users that provide support for other scientists in the realm. I think I've done a horrible job at explaining this book, but you've probably heard it to death. I rated this 4.5 stars because it was just a really wonderful love story. The ending caught me a little bit off guard, but I was expecting that given the other reviews that I'd heard of this book. But I really loved it so much. It wasn't my favorite of the core STEMinist novels, but I really think I will definitely be returning to this book. Let's be real. I loved it so much. And Bea and Levi had just such amazing chemistry. This was a very successful read in my opinion. On to the next book. Reading Ali Hazelwood's STEMinist romances really made me think I was a science gal through and through, and I read The Elements of Marie Curie after reading Love on the Brain, and I think it was just the perfect progression from going from a character who's obsessed with Marie Curie to reading a book about her myself. This was a really informative and wonderful read because it took us through the progression of Marie Curie's career, as well as the women and other people in her lab that helped her along the way and contributed to science and what we know now. I found it really interesting because I'd only had a surface level understanding of her life. I really liked this read. I rated it 5 stars, but it's a different 5 stars to my other fiction ones. It's a non-fiction 5 stars because it was very informative. It was also very well written. The scientific aspect of this book, we were really walked through it. There were some things, of course, that I wouldn't really get as a person that hasn't touched a science textbook or anything since high school. So I definitely recommend this if you are wanting to learn more about Marie Curie. I then read the 3 Loath to Love You novellas, but I did count them as 3 separate books because I wanted to rate them individually. I might just read you what's on the back of the blurb because I think they sum up the plot very well without me giving you spoilers. So, under one roof, an environmental engineer discovers that scientists should not cohabitate when she finds herself stuck with the roommate from hell, a detestable big oil lawyer who won't leave the thermostat alone. It was kind of a enemies to lovers kind of situation, forced proximity, and I really liked it. And then the other 2 stories follow her best friends, and I loved that we could keep in touch with the former characters from the novellas. Stuck With You is a civil engineer and her nemesis take their rivalry and love to the next level when they get stuck in a New York elevator. Below Zero, a NASA aerospace engineer's frozen heart melts as she lies injured and stranded at a remote Arctic research station, and the only person willing to undertake the dangerous rescue mission is her longtime rival. I just love it so much. I think I gave them all 3.5 stars, but in hindsight, I really enjoyed them. They were fun, quick, easy reads, and I am so glad that I picked this book up because sometimes all you need is a quick, easy STEMinist novella to bring you all the warm and fuzzies, but also the angst and tension of an enemies to lovers story, which so many of these were. I can most definitely say that Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood was the last Ali Hazelwood book that I read in January, but it is most definitely not the only one in this video. I gave this book a wholehearted, unabashed 5 stars. In this book, we follow Rue, and she meets Eli through a dating app. They have one night together, and not in the way that you would presume, but they spend the night talking to each other, and he gets her out of a sticky situation, only to discover that the next day, who shows up to her workplace? None other than Eli. I loved this romance. I loved this couple. I loved their chemistry. The plot was believable, and I just loved it so much. People say that it's not their favorite of Ali Hazelwood's, but to be totally honest with you, it is up there as one of my favorite of her books. The chemistry between these 2 characters really makes sense because it is through their intimacy that they are able to connect and get on a deeper level, especially in Rue's case when she's not looking for something that's going to bring too much intimacy out of her, but it is through physical intimacy that she is able to trust Eli, and they just have this magnetic chemistry. They cannot keep away from each other, and that is just what I love. I want a man that just looks at a woman and is like, you, I just want you, I fall for you, you. And that you was Rue. So I am so glad that I read this book when I did, because it was just the perfect, sugary, amazing romance, and I will definitely be returning to this one. Ali Hazelwood very quickly became one of my auto buy authors. I read Love Theoretically on Boxing Day, and I have since read literally pretty much everything that she's published so far. I need to listen to the two player game or something like that of her Spotify original audiobook. That's the only one I haven't listened to, I think. Or in Check and Mate. I need to read Check and Mate. Then my reading success kind of got a little bit derailed when I read Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. This was not an unsuccessful book by any means, but it isn't my favorite of hers. This book follows Ada, our interior designer, as she joins the Meadowlark team as their interior designer for the Rebel Blue Ranch's old house, turning it into a new B&B type setup. On this project, she is hired by Wes. This is his like little pet project on the farm ranch. I liked it, but some of the writing just lost me. There was one part where he was like, I don't want to make her uncomfortable because then I'd be an asshole. I don't make it a habit to be an asshole. I'm sorry. What? Let's just be a little less cringe. Some of the writing did cringe me out. I did like the characters, but some things were just too cliche to not wince at. That was a bit of a letdown for me, but I was glad to kind of continue the series. So this was a 2.75 stars. Wasn't the most successful read ever. There were some moments that I did smile and wiggle out, but it definitely wasn't as successful as Done and Dusted was. Oh guys, I fully lied to you. I'm just looking down at my laptop. I fully lied to you. I read Cruel Winter with You by Ali Hazelwood in January as well. Just wasn't in this stack here because it was a digital novella on Kindle as part of like their kind of Christmas release that they had last year. I read this in January because what other time do you want to hold on to the Christmas spirit than in January when it's too warm? I wanted to read a winter romance. This one, I don't even know who it follows, but I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much. It was kind of a second chance romance or like childhood best friends to lovers type situation. Forced proximity because they're snowed in. I really liked it. I thought it was very successful. It was like that fun, sugary vibe, even more so than the Loath to Love You novella binder. So I did lie to you, but that is definitely my last Ali Hazelwood of January. Then I listened to the audiobook of Onyx Storm. I feel like everyone is talking about this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. It had been left too long since reading the first and second books. Then I picked up the third without as much context as what I had needed. I liked it, but I'm not getting all the warm and fuzzies and excitement that everyone else is getting. Obviously, it's part of the Empyrean series. I don't want to say too much more about it because it is the third book in a series and I don't want to spoil anything for you. I just am not the biggest fan of the love interest. I'm just not his biggest fan. It's like one of those situations where I'm like, oh, he's great for our main character, but I don't even think that. We'll see how we go. I will be definitely continuing this series, but I think we have to wait until like 2027 for the next installment of the Empyrean series. Onyx Storm was what I needed. I think with the fourth one, I will be rereading all of them together and then my mind might change. Our very final read of January, and a very special one, was The Wedding People. This is the book that made me pick up a camera and start talking because I could not fathom not talking to anyone about this book. We follow Phoebe as she goes to this luxury hotel for a single night, only to discover that she is the only person not invited to the wedding that is being held at this venue. She then goes on to meet the bride, and of course, then everything ensues from there. 5 out of 5 stars. I genuinely loved this book so much, and I cannot wait until most of the plot has left my brain so I can reread it. I am just so thankful that I read it when I did. It was one of those right book, right time, right plot. It was very reminiscent of Mrs. Dalloway and Jane Eyre, I think, because our main character is like a Victorian era professor. So there were a lot of references to that, and I just love those books so much. Actually, I haven't read Jane Eyre, so I need to read Jane Eyre, and then I need to reread this book just so I can get more out of it. But it was just such a beautiful book about humanity. It was witty and funny as well, where it could have gone down the road of being heavy or depressing, but it was amazing. Lit fic, it can just pull all the heartstrings, and this one most certainly did. I'm going to take a 2-minute break because I have been talking for goodness knows how long about the books that I read in January, and then we're going to come back and talk about every single book I read in February. And we are back. January closed with one of the best reads I have ever read. Where February picked up was with one of the most disappointing books that I've read this year, Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. To be fair, it could be argued that this book paled in comparison, and on any other given day, this could have been a higher rated book, but I rated this 2 stars. We follow Hallie, and she has recently lost her grandmother and thus inherited her grandmother's landscaping business, and she has had a long time crush on Julian. He is a professor, and he has come home to his family winery to write a book, but his plans have been royally foiled by our main character Hallie as she messily redoes their family garden. Then they strike up a friendship. Hallie then goes on to leave Julian secret admirer letters on his morning run trail, but the complication left a sour taste in my mouth. I read it in my Valentine's Day vlog, and I actually spoiled it in that video because I was just so disappointed with the ending of this book. If you want to be spoiled, go watch that video. I will link it down below. This book was just so disappointing. The complication made no sense. You could tell that the miscommunication was just strategically stupid. Anyway, go watch that vlog because I was so angry when I read this and that I wasted however many days reading this book. It will probably be in my first unhaul ever. I can't stand looking at this book. It's been sat in my study because I actually can't fathom looking at it and being like, I wasted time on that book. Maybe it was a 1 star. Our next read for that Valentine's Day video was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is my first ever read of Jane Austen, but I have plenty more on her shelves, so we will be diving into other ones in the very near future, I am sure. This one follows the Dashwood family. Marianne and Eleanor, the older 2 sisters, are looking for love and kind of stumble along the way with their misguided choices and their long lost loves. I really enjoyed this book, and I really enjoyed the movie actually. I would always suggest, if you have access to a movie, watch the first 15 minutes, get Who's Who in the Zoo, and then dive into a classic like this, because sometimes you can get lost in the weeds. I did also listen to the audio while I was reading this, and it really helped me grasp what was happening. This was like a solid 3.5 to 4 stars, probably the only classic that I've read this year, but I will be diving into more Jane Austen very soon because I do like her writing and I love her romances, so we should dive into more. I then reread Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This was in my recent releases video. It is a reread because I read her book in 2023 when I was on a trip to Malta when it was still on Kindle Unlimited, but I just had to reread the re-released version. We follow Win, and she meets her beautiful hero, Beau, at a Halloween party. They get to flirting and they have a one-night stand. Little does Win know that in the next few weeks, she will be finding out that she is pregnant. This book is just so beautiful because the romance of the 2 characters makes sense, and they consider each other so beautifully as they navigate their limb differences, just in general life, as well as how their limb differences will fit into parenthood together. I loved this book so much. It will always be a 5 to 6 star read for me. Returning to this book was like returning to a warm hug, and it will continue to do so every single day of the week. Next up was also for my Valentine's Day video, Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I did like this book. It was pretty good. Can we see a theme happening with rivals to lovers romances? I think it's one of my favorite tropes. Our main characters Iris and Roman work at the same paper, and they are competing for this, I think, head journalist or columnist position at the paper that they work at. There is this looming war in the background that has fantastical elements, but the main fantastical element within this book is that Iris has a typewriter that magically delivers letters to another person. It was 4 stars for me. The ending of the book was a little bit lackluster. We were accelerating towards a point and then it just kind of died off. I wish there was more payoff towards the end of the book, but otherwise it was a very successful read and I quite liked it. And Hannah Bonham Young returns again with Out of the Woods, her most recent release. I read this in the recent releases video, obviously, and I loved it so much. Sarah is in a funk in this book. She doesn't know why she's just fallen into this. She doesn't know what her main purpose and motivations are, and she feels that this has been trickling into her relationship with longtime partner and husband Caleb. They met when they were in high school and traveled the highs and lows of life together. Sarah is wondering what else is out there for her when Win, our main character from Out on a Limb, suggests that maybe they should go on a 7-day-long camp to reignite their relationship and have their first experience in the great outdoors together. This book was just so beautiful because we don't really see many kind of second chance romances without a breakup, but they re-established their love for each other and strengthened it in this time, and I just really appreciated being within the thick of a relationship but seeing that if there are complications, if one of you isn't happy, there are ways to work towards happiness and fulfillment within a relationship that's already established. I thought this was like a breath of fresh air, and I'm so glad that I picked this one up. Oh, guys, another 5-star read. Miss Ali Hazelwood lasted about, I think, 7 books before she was mentioned again. Deep End by Ali Hazelwood was an absolute joy to read. I gave this one 5 stars, but is it really a surprise? We follow Scarlett, and she is a very promising diver, but she is recovering from an injury that happened about 15 months prior to the start of this book, but she just can't get through this mental block of doing the dive that injured her. Scarlett then strikes up a conversation with her team member about her team member's boyfriend, Lucas, and his proclivities, if you get what I'm saying, and realize that Scarlett and Lucas, surprisingly, their interests align. They then go and explore that. I think that's the only way that I can really describe this. It was amazing. I loved it absolutely so much. You have probably seen this book paraded around everywhere. Ali Hazelwood can literally do no wrong in my eyes. This book cemented her as a favorite. Not in Love and this book are my favorites by her, and it makes sense because they have a similar value upon intimacy, then bringing strength to the emotional sides of the relationships. So I think that's why I love them so much. But yeah, this one really did it for me. I bought this the day that it came out, and I saw it and I was like, you're coming home with me. Sorry, bye. I'm reading it this week. The romance, the tension, the angst, loved it so much. We'll be rereading soon. Okay, let's temper ourselves a little bit, because then I read Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage, and it was a 3.75 stars, a whole 1-star improvement from the previous book. Let's be honest, I started recording a progression in series video only to realize that everything recorded with a dead mic. So you literally didn't see me read this book, but it was a journey. I really liked it. We are following Teddy Anderson and Gus Ryder, and they are notoriously, in all of the other books of this series, they don't like each other. They're enemies. But when Teddy loses her job and Gus has a lot on his plate, they are forced to be together and help each other and fall in love and have so much fun. And yeah, this was just a silly, goofy, giggly time. Again, I think because I read Deep End before this book, it suffered from that hangover that a 5-star read can give you. It suffered from that a little bit, but I still liked it. It was still exactly what I thought it was going to be, and it still gave me those fun, silly, goofy vibes. So it was a 3.75 star, but I am going to continue the series with the one that I think is coming out in April, so I'm actually very excited to pick that one up. In a similar vein, none of the audio recorded, but I read Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, the second installment in the Letters of Enchantment series, and the final installment because it is a duology. It was a 3-star. I didn't really vibe with it. In hindsight, it's probably a 2.5. Nothing made sense to me. I just thought that everything was very convenient. I did like how the roles kind of reversed with the typewriter thing. At the same time, the magic was a lot heavier. The ending was so convenient. It was like, boom, we're dusted. We've just spent 2 books trying to build up this complication, and it's done. I don't know how I really feel about Ruthless Vows. I did read it less than a week ago, so I think I still need to sit with it. But I don't think it's going to be one of those books that I return to again and again or think about very often, because it was kind of lackluster for me. The Cloisters and Secretly Yours will be sat in the unhauled pile together, because this book was one of the most disappointing reads I have ever read. I recently read it in my latest video, I believe, my Read It or Unhaul It, and let's just say I should have done myself a favor and unhauled it while I had the chance. This book sounded like it would have been perfect for me. It is a woman entering a gothic environment. Let me just read the blurb, because I don't even want to bother trying to think up a more engaging way to summarize the book. Anne Stillwell arrives in New York. She hopes to spend the summer working at the city's Metropolitan Museum of Art. Instead, she is assigned to the Cloisters, the Met's Gothic museum and garden renowned for its collection of medieval and Renaissance art. She then goes on to study divination and all that fun vibe, but it was so lackluster. There were only 4 people that could have done the whodunit. One of them was dead. One of them was our main character. So it's a 50-50 split as to who you think it is. And when it was the 50-50 split, there was one person we could trust, one person we couldn't. In that video, I did talk about The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. If you want a gothic setting, The Writing Retreat did it so much better than The Cloisters. This one was a waste of time. It was 2 stars. It will be unhauled ASAP. Then I read Ali Hazelwood's Bride. Dearest gentle reader, I can assure you that this is the very last Ali Hazelwood that I have read, because it is the second last read. Bride is about a vampire, Misery, and a werewolf, Lo, coming together in an arranged marriage in the hopes of cementing an alliance between the two species. I really liked this book. However, I did predict the main plot twist, I think. So reading the ending kind of came to this, like, oh, I was right conclusion rather than, oh crap, that just happened. I did really enjoy this book. It was 4.5 stars. I've read it in my most recent videos, so might as well go check that out for more deep understanding of this book. But guys, we have been talking for much too long, but we have arrived at the final read of this video, and that is Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. I also read this book in my most recent video, so I'll just give you the briefest of rundowns. Laura and her father are walking into town one day when they witness a carriage accident. In that carriage was Carmilla. Her mother says, I can't take her with me. Can you look after her? And so Carmilla enters their family home, only to later discover that Carmilla is a vampire and she has been slowly feeding off our dearest Laura. This book started out as a cautionary tale against homosexuality, but it has been reclaimed as a sapphic story. I found it very interesting how sexuality and desire were explored in this book. It was a bit of a letdown to find out that it was kind of a cautionary tale against homosexuality. If you have homosexual thoughts, a vampire will suck your blood. That kind of vibe. But I think reclaiming it and kind of separating those meanings from the intentions of the author can kind of make it a camp sapphic story. And you know what? Maybe we should be reading books outside of the intentions of the writer and giving them modern meanings, because that is what I'm choosing to do with this book. And so I rated it 3.5 stars. But yeah, I'm so glad that I read this book. I love vampiric stories, and so to read a book that has predated so many others, I was really glad to have that under my belt. So that is everything that I have read so far in 2025 in January and February. Thank you so much for sticking around. I hope this video isn't a million minutes long, but I think you can see with the rise and fall of the reads that we've had so far this year that it has been the most successful reading year that I have ever had. We have an average rating of 3.95 stars, and that was only made worse by The Cloisters. I was having a 4.05 until The Cloisters let me down. Hopefully it just continues to climb up and up, and let me know your most favorite book of this year. I know I have a fair few in there, and I know I've gushed about so many books, but I want to know your favorites. I will see you in the next one.